Hello. Today's video for the discussion thread will be introducing you to your speech and specifically covering the introduction. There was no pun intended, by the way. I don't like puns. A couple things real quick. This is the second time I'm shooting this video because the first time the fan was way too loud. So I find these things out. It's a very hot weekend. Please excuse the quarantine hair. This is the longest hair I've ever had since I was a kid, so this is completely new to me. So it's been a while. Let's see what else is there. Okay, so I'll be covering what your first speech is about, the outline, and specifically the introduction. All right. As always, at the end of the video and in the discussion thread in Canvas, answer the question, but you do need to watch the video for class purposes. All right. Let's see. Let's get started. First off, your speech. Now, this course is divided into three speeches, three different sections. The first section is your future planning speech. I'll get into that in a second, but each section has a purpose. The first section's purpose is to teach you the structure in reaching an audience. Teaching you the structure of a speech and reaching an audience, all right? And so your first speech is going to be about your future and your future planning. Pretty easy speech because it's about you. And so your research is not that hard. Now, I'm trying to get situated here. Just hope there's no loud fan noises again. So your speeches, now just to let you know, in the assignments for Canvas you're going to see more details about your first speech, more instructions about it. We're going to talk a lot about it in the Zoom meetings, but just to give you a quick gloss over what it is a informative speech in a chronological pattern, meaning that your main points will go over a certain pattern, and it's set up for you. You don't change it. It's exactly easy for you to bring out. Everyone's going to do the same thing. An informative speech where your main points are going to be past, present, future. All right. So your speech is about your future planning and how you get there, using your past, present, and then your future. We'll cover over more in detail. And there's a cultural requirement to get you started on the idea of making a citation and research. You need to make a cultural community reference. Why you're going into this profession, is there a cultural community aspect to it? So for example, when I was in high school, I applied for film schools, actually, and I did get accepted. Then I got into politics. I don't want to start about that. Anyways, but I did. And so if I was talking about, I don't know, my background and doing the same speech you're doing, I maybe talk about my past, growing up in a rough neighborhood where escapism was an important part of it. So reading and watching movies was an important part of that escapism. So you see how that works. Don't be afraid. One of the mistakes students make is they don't say exactly who they're talking about. So if they want to reference, for example, I speak fluent German, so if I talk about my German heritage as a cultural reference, I would say it. I wouldn't say my people speak German. I would say my mother's side who immigrated from Germany. So you understand, I had students who come up and say just general things when they could have said Mexican American, as a woman, as a gay American, lots of different ways to say who you're trying to reflect, who you're trying to say as a culture or a community. I grew up in, don't just say I grew up in a rough neighborhood, I grew up in a working poor neighborhood. Be specific. Don't be afraid to be specific. There's no judgment, there's nothing. Inclusive language, inclusive, it's a easy place for you to say all that stuff. So you understand. Don't be afraid to be specific when you have the culture community reference. We'll talk about that more. Alright, that's your first speech. A speech about yourself, informative, past, present, future. So what is the structure? Well, it's pretty easy. There's an outline for it. First, before I get into the outline, I just want to cite where I get it from. I've first started teaching communication studies over at Cal State LA, and I really like their outline because their outline is exactly the type of outline I use for my papers. So this outline I'm sharing with you is not only proven in multiple campuses, but it is a great outline for you to use for your future papers and so forth, because that's what your papers are. You've already done this kind of structure where you have an introduction, you have a couple paragraphs explaining it in your essay, and then you have a conclusion at the end. That is exactly what you're doing, and this gives a nice setup on how to do it. So the outline is real easy for you to find. It is in your syllabus, the last 2 pages of your syllabus, and I also separated it and put it in a different file. So if you go to Files in Canvas, you're going to see your syllabus, of course, which I highly recommend you print. But if you don't want to print it and you just want to print, just print the outline, either from the syllabus or from this separate file. It's in Word, Microsoft Word, and also in PDF. And you're going to find that this outline, and we're going to cover it more in the Zoom meetings, but today I'm going to cover specifically the intro, but it's 5 sections, no more, no less, 5 sections. Introduction, main point 1, main point 2, main point 3, and conclusion. Actually, I should do that different. Main point, intro, main point 1, main point 2, main point 3, and conclusion. I did that different. You'll understand why. And you want to remember that. The main points are your meat and potatoes. You're going to hear me talk about it before, but a lot of my colleagues have always said it's like a hamburger or a sandwich, where the introduction and the conclusion are the buns, and the main points is the meat and the toppings and so forth. It's really a structure to lead your audience on a path. Your path for your first speech is really easy. You introduce what you're talking about, you lead them on the past, present, future of your main points, and you end it with the conclusion. Pretty simple. And the outline, by the way, is the outline you're going to be turning in. So all it is just you filling in the blanks. Not that difficult. Very easy. So don't psych yourself up, and don't make it, I got all this stuff. It's right there. Fill in the blanks. We'll cover it more. No worries. All right? Okay, so that's the outline, where to find it, where to use it, how important it is. We're going to cover it more and more. Again, the first section, your first speech, it's all about structure and reaching an audience. All right? Speaking of reaching the audience, this is my replica of an old concert poster with soul. I love soul music. I love all types of music except for one I'm not particularly fond of, country. Anyways, but I'm a big soul fan, and so Stevie, Smokey's up there, Gladys Knight, Marvelettes, lots of soul singers, and that's how I get your attention. Your first part of your speech is your introduction, and you're starting off by getting your audience, the attention of your audience. So what is the introduction? That's what we're going into next. That's my little bad attention getter. We'll get into that more. So the introduction, there's 2 key rules I want you to remember from this video. 2 key rules. I'm not going to inundate you with a bunch of other ones. 2 key rules I want that. 1, do not bring any of your evidence or reasoning or any kind of logic or whatever stuff you're trying to convince your audience or inform your audience and so forth in your introduction. That is a setup. You're setting up your audience for your introduction. Your meat and potatoes, your bread and butter is your main point. That's where you bring the evidence and reasoning and so forth. Your introduction, the 1 rule, you do not present that stuff in your introduction. The second rule is your introduction is very important. Remember I did this little thing? Your introduction is usually, your first speech is only 5 minutes. Easy. Get it out there. Usually the introduction is about a minute, 15, minute 10. Try for a minute. Pretty simple. And the reason why you want that time is the setup does take a little bit longer than the different main points. It's definitely a conclusion. I put the pinky as a conclusion because it's usually the shortest section of the 5 sections. It's usually about 45 seconds, 30 seconds, the smallest. But you know, it's usually the smallest. All right, so the pinky. Anyways, I don't want to get that. So your intro is the most important part of your speech. I'm going to say that again. Your introduction is the most important part of speech. Yes, it's not, again, the first rule, you're not bringing evidence, you're not bringing your reasoning, but you're setting it up to bring those stuff in, to bring those things into play. And that's important with your introduction. So let's go over the individual components. Because here's the spoiler for the introduction. It's these little things you have to do, and because you check the boxes, you make sure you do all these things, that minute 15 seconds is real easy. A lot of students think, oh, I don't have enough to say, and so they throw things in that they should put in their main points. But in reality, if you do all the things on the outline, you're there. It's real easy. So let's get started. I use my attention getter of my poster, which, by the way, I love this poster. But the thing about your attention getter, that's the first thing. This intro has different components, and the first component is an attention getter. Attention getter, the attention getters I like to use are like a metaphor, an example of the concept or the subject or whatever I'm trying to introduce. A lot of students like to use facts, but it's not, hi, my name is, and I'm here to talk about this. No, you'll see me write weak on your outline. It's not good. Don't do that. What you want to do is get your audience and attention by bringing up something. You know, I said earlier your evidence needs to be in there. The only time evidence is really used in an introduction is the attention getter. Personally, I like the metaphors, the similes, and so forth, and I'll explain why later. But that's usually what it is. So back when I was in high school, when I applied for college in my senior year, I applied for film schools. And the reason why I bring it up, an attention getter for that would be something like, we're all trying to, 2020 is horrible. We're all trying to escape all the different horribleness of 2020. Pandemic, pandemic, quarantine, fires, and we can't even go to the movies. But there was a time when the movies was my escape. See how that works? That is an attention getter. There's lots of different things. The one I always use is you're going down a long road, or another one is, I use a lot as an example. I actually don't use it in my speeches. Or when the planets align, they're most powerful. Simple stuff like that. It's a way to introduce your audience to what concept, what you're trying to get them to think, informative or persuasive in their speech. All right? Attention getter. And it could be entertaining too, by the way. No bad jokes. No bad jokes. That's my game. The second part is the background. Now this is where students make a mistake. They think they have to explain everything in the background, when in reality it's just 2 sentences. Movies was my escapism. So that's why being a film director is a way to get movies made in this country. Or, you know, and that's why I'm here to talk about the method to become a film director. See how that works? That's a background. It's a background, not a background about yourself, background about the topic. If your future is in whatever profession, then you're going to talk about that in the background. 2 sentences, real quick. This is so forth. All right, so you understand. Since you're talking about your future, I'm going to be this person. All right, so you understand. Your background is a subject you're about to do. 2 quick sentences. Don't be informative. Don't be persuasive. 2 quick sentences about what you're going to talk about. Attention getter, background, and that leads into audience relevance. Now, again, I originally, this outline came from Cal State LA, so I used their terms because I don't believe in changing the source material and give credit where credit's due, unlike those professors who use my activities in their classes and don't say who told them that. Anyways, or their department chairs. Anyways, shade, throwing shade. But audience relevance is, I'm looking at time because I have to do this at night. Audience relevance is important because audience relevance is connecting your audience. That's why I call it audience connection. But audience relevance is connecting your audience to the subject. So you did the background, you did a quick intro to your subject. Now you're telling your audience why they should care about it. And it's really easy for your first speech. Because the fact of the matter is they're students who are trying to figure out their future too. And they might just be interested in it. Hey, we've all been to movies, we've all seen movies. You ever wonder why they get directed? That's audience connection. Find that connection to your audience, to the subject you're about to talk about. So attention getter, background, audience relevance, find that connection. And to solidify that connection goes into the next segment, the next component, which is speaker credibility. This one's real easy for you in the first speech. It's I know where I've been, I know where I'm going, I know what I want to do, and I've looked into all the possibilities. Pretty easy. Speaker credibility is usually stuff like that. It's usually the expert statement. So like if I was actually doing a professional speech where I was talking about something that I talk about I have these degrees, I worked with these politicians, I worked on these issues, I served, I did this and that. That's where speaker credibility is. Like I'm the expert. In this case, you're the expert on yourself. And a lot of times students have already done something in the profession they want to do. So I had students who want to be a mechanic and they're like, well, I've been working on cars with my dad or my mom for years now. You see how that works? You just say, hey, I'm a student, I'm trying to figure out my future, and by the way, I already have a background in this. That is speaker credibility. Not a long explanation, just one or two quick sentences, real easy. Thesis is next. Thesis is the most important part of the introduction. So because it's the most important part of the introduction, I'm skipping it. We're going to go over that last. We're going to go over that last because it's that important. But checking on my dog. But we're going to go over now the last component, which is a preview of main points. It's really easy. That preview main points is their words from the original outline. I like to call it a roadmap. And you'll hear me say roadmap. You might even get a question on the test saying, oh, what is the, in lecture, what does the professor refer to the preview of main points? It's a roadmap. You're setting up your audience. You've already done this in your essays. I'm going to first talk about this, I'm going to talk about that, and then I'm going to talk about this. Pretty simple stuff. All right? And that's what you're doing in your first speech. I'm going to talk about my past, then I'm going to talk about my present, and then I'm going to talk about my future. Now, you don't want to use exactly the same language. I don't want to hear 40-something speeches. So I have 3 classes in the same area. So I don't want to hear a whole lot of the same thing of, I'm going to talk about my past, present, future. It's stuff like if I was doing the film director thing. First, I'm going to talk about the escapism from my past. And then I'm going to talk about the classes I'm taking for film. And then finally, I'll talk about all the ways I can possibly become a film director. Now, of course, I did not do that. But you see how that works. You're setting up your audience for what you're about to do, and it's your 3 main points. So it's real easy. They're in your outline. They're your titles for your main points. Main point 1, main point 2, main point 3. I'm going to first talk about this, then I'm going to talk about that, and then finally I'm going to talk about this. Pretty simple. That is a preview. We'll cover that more. But let's go back a bit to the thesis. All right? We'll put this down. We'll talk about the thesis and the most important part. The thesis is the most important part, and this is where I separate myself from other professors and other subjects, because a lot of times thesis statements are a long sentence that covers everything that you want covered in it, and I understand that, but I believe in public speaking, and the way I teach public speaking is I want your audience to remember your thesis. I want you to remember your thesis. Thesis should be a direct statement, a quick, direct statement. The best way to explain it is this. When you're asking someone out on a date, you're not going to tell them, hey, we're 2 people who like to go out. There's things to do. I know it's quarantine and there's not that much open, but we can find stuff in a socially distanced, safe area to spend time together on maybe, I don't know, a Friday night. there's so many different options, and I know you might have feelings that doesn't work. Hey, you want to go get a burger sometime? Hey, you want to go get a coffee? You want to go? How about we go each grab our own things, and we'll meet in a public place and safely distance talk to each other. You see how that works? A direct statement. If you're that person who tells you all the different things and explains over and over again all the different options on a date, you're not going to get the date. You're not going to inform them. You're not going to persuade them. A direct statement helps. It doesn't mean that your thesis has to be just a direct statement. A lot of times students will do the direct statement. In this case, I'm going to be this. I'm going to be, here's a couple of sentences, examples. Not exact word for word, but I'm just paraphrasing. I'm going to be a business owner. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be this type of nurse. I'm going to be this type of teacher. I'm going to be in law enforcement. And they get a little bit more specific, but it's very direct. And then they'll maybe have a sentence after to get more of the traditional thesis that you were taught in your English courses and so forth, which is, I'm going to be this. There's many ways to do it. And then that leads in, because here's the problem. Here's why I want a direct statement. You're taught in your English courses to say everything, and usually thesis statements from English courses have like what you be your main points, and then in your speech you have to preview your main points. So direct statement, maybe a sentence after, that's your thesis, and then you preview what you're going to talk about in your preview main points, your roadmap. So for you to write your thesis, and we're going to cover thesis more, that's going to be one of the participations in class, you're going to have to make a direct statement about your future, right? For your thesis. Now, what are you going to do for your discussion thread for this one? Well, if you already read ahead and you already know it, but you're supposed to watch this whole video, so hopefully you did that. You're going to be better for it. But here's what I want you to do for your discussion. You remember I said earlier, they said the hamburger and the burger, I do more of a box. And the reason why that is I believe that the attention getter and the memorable closer are the top and the bottom of the box, where there's a lot of stuff inside, but it's connected to each other. You don't realize it through the thing, but it just nicely wraps up your speech. And the reason why I say this is because it's made from the same wrapping paper, same box material, and so forth. So that's why I know I can say, oh, the same bread for the burger, whatever. The reason why I want you to remember that is that's what I want you to do for your attention getter. Because at the end of your conclusion is what they call a memorable closer. Oh, by the way, spoiler alert, your conclusion is just a redo of your introduction in reverse. We'll get into that later. But the first part of your speech, I'm coughing because of the air quality, not because of, illness. But the first part of your speech is the attention getter. At the bottom, your conclusion is your memorable closer. And so what I want you to do is think of attention getter and memorable closer that's related to each other. So I said earlier about escapism and escaping 2020. By going to the movies. And then my memorable closer for that example, by the way, you can't take mine, you got to create your own, but my memorable closer for that would be, hopefully someday maybe you can all come together and go watch one of my movies in a theater, but not in 2020. Have a good day. Woo. You see how that works? So, when I do the planets align example, when all the planets align, and then at the memorable closer for that would be something like, hopefully we can all connect and get in together and find that alignment that finds the most power to get the best results. Going down the memorable lane, and we see in memorable closer, we see the trees. Don't get distracted by the trees. Just always keep focused on the road ahead. Closer. Woo! So your discussion thread, your participation points for today, for them, you're going to come up with your, by the way, I'm closing off comments, so you can post, and you're not going to see anybody else's until you post. You need to post an idea for a memorable closer, and an attention getter, and a memorable closer, and try to make sure that they are related. It's a nice wrapping. It's a nice, I don't know, bun connection, if you want to use the hamburger sandwich metaphor. It is something for your audience to remember your speech by having an attention getter and a memorable closer that are related to each other. If you do a big fact in the beginning, a subsequent fact about how things change or so. You see how that works, all right? We can discuss. By the way, discussion threads, you don't have to do it before class. You can do it after class. We can talk about it in class, all right? Or you can ask and send me emails through Canvas. Remember, contact me through Canvas, or if you need arranged times. And remember, we have our open sessions, office hours coming up, so you can buzz there for that, all right? If you have questions or anything, there you go. All right, have a good day. Oops.